Welcome Internet Explorers. In today's trip we leave Granada and head to Cordoba.
And this time I have got tickets at 2 attractions booked.
Welcome to the long free ride.
Today's drive is quite a short one by the long free ride standards. Our first stop at the Granada charger only needs to be a quick one, but we're grabbing breakfast, so we might be there longer than needed. There is no Tesla supercharger close to Cordoba, so we were planning to grab some charger and Tierra on the way north, and then use the same charger again as we head south in the next episode.
Breakfast as we charged was a bit of a disappointment. We often see people eating interesting things but don't have the language skills to ask for them ourselves. So once again, we ended up with coffee and pastries. It was a great day to be driving though. The blue skies were streaked with artistic high cirrus clouds, and the Tesla was eating up the miles as we headed west. Our lunchtime stop at Antequera was more successful as there were a number of food pictures we could point at. These services also had a covered outside dining area, which was nice in the midday sun. As we ate, we began to reflect on our time in Granada.
At this point, John goes on a bit of a rant, so those of a delicate constitution may wish to skip to the next chapter.
So Michelle, we went to Granada and we didn't see the thing that it's actually famous for. But how did you find the city overall?
Yeah, I liked the vibe. It was quite easy to navigate, although that is your department. And great viewpoint, old city, and we got to see a flamenco show. I'm happy.
We did get to see a flamenco show, which to my mind is a bit like Irish dancing. A lot of stamping, a little bit more clapping in this one, and obviously some really, really good Spanish guitar playing, but it does have some bird who just wails in the back all the time. She's missed her bus or something, I don't know. And or her numbers haven't come up on the lottery, and she's a bit cheesed off about it.
It wasn't saying that she'd missed her bus, but I actually think the male flamenco dancer definitely carried that performance.
Yeah, you don't say, eh? Now, the main attraction is the Alhambra, and we didn't have tickets for that because we were really quite unsure as to whether we were even going to make it this far or whether we were just going to abandon this trip because I was not doing well. But I'm hopefully on the road to recovery.
Yeah. Well, I just lost confidence that A, we were going to make it, and B, that you could cope with it.
There's a lot of walking around as well.
Yeah, and up a hill, and there'd be stone steps and all those sorts of things.
So we were then left with the option of trying to book last minute tickets, and they have last minute tickets all the time. The trouble is that they seem to launch them at midnight for the next day, and potentially for other days as well. And I'm presuming these are tickets that online resellers have said, yeah, we're not going to be able to sell those, an allocation they've been given. And so you will all of a sudden get these tickets appear at midnight, but everybody knows that. And so everybody is on the website at midnight, and basically the whole thing crashes. Now, whoever is responsible for that website needs replacing. So if you are in the government in Granada, just find out who he is, get rid of him. He is useless. Not only is there problems with the whole process of the database crashing, so you'll get halfway through a booking and then you get thrown out, and then when you go back in it says you've got no tickets, or you'll go back in it says you've got tickets, and then when you go to try and book them it says there are no tickets, and it turns out then that's because the only tickets you've got is for 65-year-olds who are European old age pensioners, and they're the only tickets that are available. But the whole thing is just a farce, and it doesn't tell you any of this information. They've got this Google checking thing going on, you know, the I'm not a robot thing, that comes up every time. Every time you have to identify another blinking bicycle or a bridge or traffic lights or whatever. Every time. So again, whoever's implemented that has implemented it wrongly, because that's not the way it should work. It tells you every single time you go in, do you want cookies? Even if you say, yes, I'm happy to have all of your crap cookies, then it still comes up and says, do you want cookies? Again, it's been implemented wrong. Whoever it is, Mr. Granada main man, who's responsible for that website or the company, bin them off. Bin them off. You can do far, far better. I could do far, far better for you. It's that bad.
But this is also partly, A, we accept we were trying to book last minute. B, we've chosen not to book via a third party company.
It is the biggest attraction that they've got in the city.
Yeah.
If they cannot get a web company to make that work, then somebody in government needs to be replaced.
Yeah. There's also this thing of, you're told when you book your tickets, you absolutely cannot cancel and expect a refund at any time. Even if you're booking 3 months in advance, you pay your money, you
lose your money.
Yeah, you pay it and then you lose it if you can't go.
Quite how that fits in with the distance selling regulations that the EU require you to have. Well, there's another little thing.
Yeah.
Sack him.
Don't know. I haven't looked into it, but it wasn't a good experience navigating the site when you've got 7 different tickets to choose from, because you can go to certain parts that don't include the palace. You can just go to the gardens. You can do that daytime or nighttime. And, you know, the whole thing is not a straightforward, user-friendly experience, regardless of all the server errors that we were getting and having to stay up to midnight in the first place to try and book lastminute.com. So tricky, and it's not as if
you could have used lastminute.com, it probably would have worked.
Yeah, maybe. But you know, we got advice from reception staff at the hotel, from tourist offices
when they're open.
Yeah, yeah. The tourist office was a little bit tricky.
I mean, why open during the hours that tourists might be there? Much better to open when they're not around.
Yeah, we did have an experience of turning up at 2:30 and they shut at 2. So, you know, like shut for the day at 2.
Yeah.
So,
Foxtrot Oscar.
Yes, but there we go. So that.
But to be fair, Spain is a bit like France, isn't it? It's permanently closed. You turn up for work at maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock. You then have a 2-hour lunch break, 12 till 2. You possibly get off your backside at 2:30, and then you go home at 4:30.
Well,
unless you work in one of the major businesses, but anything else, it's just they're all just shut all the time.
Anyway, it hasn't ruined our impression of Granada. We enjoyed looking at Alhambra.
Oh yes, we did. Got a bit chilly.
Yeah. And I have to say, we used an Uber taxi coming back from there, and considering we were up basically a mountain, it's probably a hill, but
it's a hill. Yeah,
really difficult to navigate to. That whole Uber service was incredible. They found us within 6 minutes. GPS wasn't great up there, and that worked brilliantly to get us back into town quickly because we were both cold.
But I'm sure that there is a moral to this story, other than me having a rant about European countries. And the moral of the story is, if you want to go to Granada to see Alhambra, make sure you've booked long in advance, because you will not be able to get tickets once you're there.
And, yes, we've criticised the website for the main booking, but we still prefer to do that than use third-party companies, particularly after the experience we had in Barcelona.
I think that's enough said about that.
On to Cordoba.
Once John had cooled down and stopped offending every European nation, we set off again for Cordoba. The 360-degree camera was supposed to give us some really nice countryside shots, but this afternoon it just became a magnet for insects.
Having settled into our accommodation and squeezed the long and wide Tesla into an underground car park, we walked into town to the Victoria Market. As well as being a traditional food market, Victoria Market has made itself into an evening entertainment venue. There are numerous small food vendors covering a wide range of cuisines, as well as beverage vendors. This allows individuals to choose what they fancy to eat and then join their friends and family indoors or outdoors to enjoy their food. There's even a laid-back cafe for a chat or the read of a book, and for those somewhat younger than ourselves, a nightclub. We really enjoyed our visit to Victoria Market and would recommend it to visitors of the city.
Refreshed, we decided to walk further into the historic heart of the city. Our route took us to the Almovedor Gate, next to which are these very pretty pools, stepping down towards the river just outside the old city walls. As we walked between the walls and pools, we came across a statue of Averroes. He was a polymath from modern-day Morocco and an expert in Islamic law. Wandering further towards the river, we found the old bridge across the Guadalquivir River. Originally Roman, it was extensively reconstructed by the Arabic rulers in the 10th century and is now only open to pedestrians. Walking back through the historic centre of Cordoba, it was interesting to see the walls of the great mosque lit up. The Great Mosque of Córdoba is also the Catholic cathedral, but that's a story for tomorrow. With tired feet, we grabbed a cab back to the accommodation, but we were already really excited about what we'd see over the coming days. Yeah, so John's ready to start on the tour. He's just applying sun lotion. It was a bit of a sprint to get here this morning, wasn't it, love?
Oh, just a brisk pace, but then again, I was kind of expecting the tour to start at the venue, not to start somewhere completely different.
Well, there we go.
That's just me.
It's how they disperse so many people on tours, isn't it? But we're looking forward to this one.
Oh, we are looking forward to it.
Excellent. So we've finished the tour. John, what are your impressions of the fortress?
Well, yes, I think the actual description was the palace of the Christian kings, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But let's face it, it was a Roman building, and then it was a Visigoth building, and then it was a Islamic building, and then finally it was conquered by two Christian kings, and turned into a palace / where they held the Spanish Inquisition. So basically a torture house with a church. But that's not how she described it on the tour.
No.
No.
People wouldn't pay for that.
She didn't want to use the word torture.
No, definitely
and
not.
Mutilation.
No.
And burning.
Stop. Very
and
pretty
limbs.
Gardens.
Oh, very pretty gardens,
Yeah,
yes.
very pretty. And all of the mosaics in the building represent something that made Cordoba important. So there were mosaics of fish which symbolised how the river connected to the Mediterranean Sea, and that made them be able to trade effectively.
It was navigable at that time, wasn't it?
Yeah, and export olive oil to the States, I think, among others.
Well, to other states, yes.
Yeah. So, and that made them rich, and the gardens really reflect that richness. I mean, it's a huge space for a city centre.
The mosaics are now up on the walls, which is not where they would have been.
No.
They are Roman mosaics, so they would have been on the floor, but they are now up on the walls.
Yeah, to preserve them, and it's all been done very nice. And we saw a tomb.
A sarcophagus.
Yeah, I wasn't going to try and say that word.
A marble sarcophagus, and that was very, very impressive.
Yeah, it was.
I'd have to say.
Yeah.
With the carvings of the various members of the family that would have been buried within that sarcophagus.
Yeah.
And also a philosopher who wouldn't have been, but was the spiritual guide.
And therefore important.
To them.
Yes, absolutely. And Medusa with the crazy hair.
Yeah. Protector, apparently.
Yeah, protector. So that was important to them. So they've reflected Medusa's picture in mosaic.
Now, the gardens we're sitting in now are not original. There were gardens here, but these are not the original gardens. These were built in around the mid-60s, 1960s. So they're very nice, but they're not original.
Yeah, but I think it's time for us to go and get a drink.
Well, it's a bit scorchio.
Hey, we spent 2 weeks moaning about the cold, so I'm not going to start moaning about the heat.
No.
Time for a drink.
True. Let's go. In the evening, it was fiesta time. Tens of thousands of the city's population were dressed up in their glad rags, grabbing their best photo and updating their Instagram feeds before heading into the main event. It's held on a massive exhibition space a couple of miles out of town and consists of probably 100 or so large marquees, each being a restaurant, bar or nightclub. Then behind all of that there's a fun fair and live music performances. The place was absolutely heaving, and we were told it was like this for the week or two that the carnival was in town. There were also the usual fairground attractions and foods available. But Michelle and I fancied a sit down, so I took her to a really classy fried food emporium where we clogged up our arteries and fortunately left without food poisoning. It was a great night out and so good to see whole families out there enjoying themselves on this balmy evening. The logistics of getting that many people in and out of such a large event also seemed to have been really well thought out.
The next day, with the bells ringing loudly across the town, it felt like we were answering a call to prayer as we headed towards the great Mosque-Cathedral of Córdoba. Cordoba was a place where Muslims, Christians and Jews lived and worked together, achieving a growth in knowledge of philosophy, religion, astronomy and medicine. Those achievements were known globally. For example, they had a prosperous, library-filled Islamic society where Christians and Jews engaged with even classical traditions such as Greek philosophy. Whilst we show you our photos, I'll try to give a brief overview, condensing 8 centuries of history into a timeline of the building projects and the people. So it started in the mid-6th century as a Visiogothic church called the Basilica of San Vicente. This was then bought by, and later demolished to make way for a mosque in the 8th century, by Abderrahman I. He was the founder and the first emir of Cordoba. The first extension to the original building was by Abderrahman II, and he was famous for 20 years of warfare and a huge building programme right across Cordoba, including universities and libraries. He added 8 additional rows of pillars to the south of the building. The second extension in the 10th century was ordered by Abderrahman III, and he added a minaret. This is where they make the call to prayer. He also extended the courtyard, which rebalanced the space inside and out. That principle of a balanced space between inside worship and a space for the public to assemble outside is very important in Islamic faiths. The third extension, also in the 10th century, by Al-Mansur, created an additional 8 naves to the east side, but building materials were poor and it reflected the imminent downfall of this regime. By 1236, Cordoba had been captured by the Christian forces. Extension number 4 came in the 16th century, which brought a Renaissance cathedral nave and transept into the centre of the existing mosque. They even had to get permission from King Carlos V in order to avoid affecting previous extensions. Extension number 5 created the current bell tower around the outside of the original minaret from Abdurrahman III, and thereby has actually preserved those original features. What struck me as we toured around the building is how distinct the religions are within the same building. So you can clearly see the classic signs of a mosque from things like the enclosed courtyard area that would have held public events for teaching or administering justice. Now it's a queuing area for those who book tours. And originally water would flow through the channels to feed the orange trees, and there would have been a fountain for ritual cleaning. There are also lots of ornamental patterns in very geometric lattices, which are classic mosque style. But you can also see the Christian church elements that bring in figurines, the altar cross. There are now paintings on the walls. There are various trophies. The seats for the choir are all made from mahogany and have huge amounts of detail carved into them. Very classic in a cathedral. What stayed with me even months after the tour is the uniqueness of the title, calling this place a Mosque-Cathedral. Never come across one of those before. Also the legacy of having 3 faiths that coexisted within Cordoba. And finally, the fact that even though it was a mosque, it doesn't actually face Mecca. And that was done deliberately, believe it or not. My research tells me there's only one other like that, and it's in Damascus.
After the Mosque Cathedral, we took a walk through the narrow streets of the Old Town to the Jewish quarter. Here we visited a historic synagogue. The Jewish faith wasn't always able to worship without hindrance and often had to pay a tax to the incumbent rulers. The synagogue's walls had been plastered over in years gone by when the Jewish faith was banned. They have been restored but are damaged in many places. In the narrow lanes there's a statue to Maimonides. He was a famous Jewish religious scholar, lawyer and physician, and was born in Cordoba in the late 12th century. However, as Jewish persecution grew, he was forced to move back to Fez in modern-day Morocco. His renown was such that even the all-conquering Muslim leader Saladin had him as his personal doctor. As with many statues, there is a belief that stroking some part of it will give some form of luck or wisdom. Needing both, I gave it a go. Cordoba also has a reputation for their courtyard gardens. These are open to paying visitors who wish to admire them. On this tour, we also discovered why the fruit on the orange trees is left to fall and rot. It is because these trees are grown for their fragrant springtime blossom, but the fruit is tough and bitter.
We really enjoyed our time in Cordoba, and there's undoubtedly a lot more to be explored. But the long free ride needs to move on. So if you do visit the city, get those tour tickets booked in advance to avoid any disappointment. We found it a lovely space to explore by night, actually, and this could be because all of the youth were out causing mischief at the carnival, but who knows? Also, don't forget that Cordoba is in the frying pan of Spain and temperatures can easily be in the late 40s at the height of summer. We visited late May and it was around 37 degrees in the afternoon.
After all that history guff, I'm sure you guys now really want to hear some stats. So here they are. In this episode, we drove 128 miles, which was 206 kilometres.
We added 54 kilowatts to the car in 2 charging stops. We were stationary for only 43 minutes, which is no time at all.
As you'll know by now, we don't need to pay if we charge at Tesla chargers, but if we had needed to pay, it would have cost us £13.13. There were no other car-related costs.
Now let's add that to the grand total for the trip so far. We hope the long free ride is demonstrating that you can do long road trips in an electric vehicle. Please like, share and subscribe to the channel to help us bring this message to a wider audience.
Next time on the long free ride, Michelle gets the heebie-jeebies at the top of the bell tower.